With over 425 national park sites, the US is a hiker's paradise. There's a climate and terrain for everyone, from hot deserts to steep mountains. Each year, millions of visitors pass through these parks, but not all of them make it out alive. Number 10. The Rocky Mountain National Park sits in one of the most beautiful US states of Colorado. The park encompasses 265,000 acres, providing hikers with stunning views, lakes, forestry, and many hiking trails to discover. The park is perhaps one of the more infamous parks in the US, and in 2019, they broke their historical record for most visitors, clocking in at 4.6 million. But forests pose a unique problem, especially when it comes to the case of Alfred Barts. With the park being so large and being surrounded by 4 forests and never-ending wilderness, it makes it all the more easier for a hiker to disappear without a trace. July 1st of 1938 marked the beginning of the Independence Day weekend in the US. Many families planned activities for the upcoming 4 days, and in the 1930s, it was common for families to spend the weekend in the wilderness. For the Barts family, led by patriarch William Barts, they packed their bags and clambered into the car. There's little information available about the Barts family, and some sources suggest that they had 10 children and hailed from Denver, Colorado. Little Alfred Barts was the most excited out of all the children about the trip, though. Alfred loved to climb and play in the trees with his siblings, and a few days in the Rocky Mountain National Park was the perfect vacation for him. Also accompanying the Barts were a few family friends, which meant more playmates for Alfred. The group arrived at the park and made their way down the logging roads to find the perfect spot. The group finally set up camp a quarter-mile away from the Fall River Lodge on the banks of the Roaring River, close to where the Roaring River meets the Fall River. Reports as to what happened to Alfred are conflicting. Most sources state that on July 2nd, 1938, Alfred and the family awoke early to get ready for a day of fishing at Estes Park. Alfred helped his father clean up from the night before, and even helped him wash up in the river. Some reports state that William, Alfred's father, and 2 family friends set off on small separate hikes in the woods, leaving Alfred on the banks of the Roaring River. When they returned 5 minutes later, Alfred was nowhere to be seen. Other sources have stated that Alfred and his family set off on a hike that July morning close to the Fall River, and at some point, Alfred lagged behind without the group noticing. When they turned around to do a head count, they realized Alfred was gone. Upon realizing he was missing, the group immediately began searching for him in the river and the woods, but there was no sign of him. Park rangers were soon called to the scene, and they began a search and investigation. The Fall River was dammed and dragged for 6 miles, exposing the riverbed, but still there was no sign of Alfred. After failing to find Alfred in the river, park rangers began searching the vast woods. Canine units were brought to the scene, and according to reports, they were able to track Alfred's scent for up to 500 feet up a steep hill, but then his scent was lost. The search for Alfred continued for 10 days until it became apparent that they weren't going to find anything. News of Alfred's disappearance spread through the park, and 2 witnesses came forward, claiming to hear shouts coming from an area called the Devil's Nest, a particularly treacherous part of the park. The area was searched, but again, there was no sign of Alfred. On November 28, 1938, the Barts received a glimmer of hope when they were sent a ransom note. The note read, "Sorry for your son, we went west, out of money. We will return your son if you leave $500 in a can 1 block from your house. We will return your son within 24 hours. Unfortunately, this ransom note was found to be a hoax. As so much time has elapsed since Alfred's disappearance, there's no agency that's currently investigating the case. His details have never been entered into the NES database, and Alfred's case has been forgotten to the sands of time." Number 9. 52-year-old Allan Clarence Ty was described as a loving and kind man who always put his family first. While Allan always channeled all of his energy towards his family and his career, he did have passions that he loved to explore outside of his normal life. Those who knew Allan described him as an avid outdoorsman who never got lost while hiking alone. Allan had been hiking in the wilderness of Montana and Minnesota for most of his life, and had become extremely familiar with the terrain, which made his 2003 disappearance all the more baffling. For over a decade, Allan, who had an adult daughter, had worked for a global positioning company and knew the importance of carrying a GPS device when he went on his solo hunts. Allan was also a budding archaeologist and anthropologist who loved to collect animals and rocks during his hunts. On November 21st, 2003, Allan left his home in Eden Lake, Minnesota, telling his mother Adela that he would be back by the end of the month, just in time for Thanksgiving. After saying his goodbyes, Allan hopped into his car and made the 850-mile drive from Minnesota to Montana. Following a grueling 14-hour drive, Allan arrived in Lewiston, Montana, and checked himself into a Super 8 motel. He told the hotel he would be there for 2 days and paid for half of his room up front. Once he had unpacked, Allan left the motel in his car and headed for the Upper Missouri River Breaks area. The Upper Missouri Breaks area had been described as tough and rugged. Fergus County Sheriff Tom Killam told the Star Tribune that the area leads down to the Missouri River and is, quote, eroded ground. It drops several hundred feet from the top down to the river bottom. It's beautiful country, but it's terribly unforgiving. According to Allan's family, he was in the area to hunt deer, and the sooner he caught one, the sooner he would be home. November 22nd was the last time that Allan Ty was ever seen alive. On November 25th, the staff at the Super 8 motel became concerned when Allan failed to check out of his room. The following day, he was reported missing to the Fergus County Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Office searched Allan's room and found that he'd left most of his belongings behind. The only thing missing were his hunting clothes and a rifle. A search team was put together, and shortly thereafter, they discovered Allan's truck abandoned in the Stafford Ferry area. Sheriff Killam confirmed that they found an empty rifle case and a pair of light boots near his car. Despite extensive search efforts, including the use of canine dogs and a plane, no sign of Allan has ever been found. His family has stated that he would never leave them behind. 8 years after Allan disappeared, he was declared deceased in absence. Allan Clarence Tice is described as a white male with gray hair, hazel eyes, 5'10" and 160 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Fergus County Sheriff's Office at 406-535-3415. Number 8. 22-year-old Jake Allan Lachelet was a bright young man full of promise and hope. Those who knew Jake described him as a loving, caring person who would go out of his way to help others, even to his own detriment. Hailing from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Jake was an outdoorsy person and enjoyed spending time alone in nature. In 2014, the Baton Rouge Police Department received a bizarre call that would kickstart a weeks-long search for 22-year-old Jake. When not working on cars, Jake could be found fishing in the many rivers that Baton Rouge has to offer. Whenever he made a big catch, Jake would snap a photo and share it with his family on social media. Aside from fishing, Jake had an artistic side and had even completed a few projects for local businesses. On August 28th, into the early hours of August 29th, 2014, Jake's life would take a bizarre turn. On the evening of August 28th, Jake spent time with family and was spotted by a witness in Port Allen. What happened after this remains a mystery to this day. At around 2 a.m. on August 29th, the Baton Rouge Police Department received a bizarre call about a man sitting on the railing of the I-10 bridge over the Mississippi River. According to the website created by Jake's family, the police did not act on this phone call, and it would take 3 more anonymous calls for the police to respond. Sometime after 8 a.m., the BRPD received their 4th anonymous call, but this time the contents were different. In this call, the caller described seeing a man jumping or falling from the bridge 175 feet into the waters below. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found an abandoned pickup truck that belonged to Jake Lachelet. Acting on the call they received at 8 a.m., they immediately began searching the river, but there was no sign of him. Bizarrely, when they arrived at the scene, Jake's truck had been left running, and the only things inside were his phone, a pack of cigarettes, and a boat motor he had recently purchased. Jake's mother, Tina Leclerc, later confirmed that Jake's wallet and crutches were missing from the truck. As authorities were unable to find him in the waters below, he was classified as a missing person, and the investigation was soon underway. When Tina discovered that her son was missing, she headed straight to his trailer to look for him, and when she entered, she found a horrifying sight. The trailer was in a complete state of disarray, as if a struggle had taken place. There were holes in the walls, and one of the windows had been completely punched out. Tina also noticed an absence of things such as Jake's TV, weapons, and other expensive items. In the first call to the BRPD, the caller explained how he had talked to the man sitting on the bridge, but no further details of this encounter have ever been released. The most frightening clue for Tina was Jake's missing crutches. He had recently undergone surgery for a broken left ankle, and as a result, he wore an orthopedic boot and needed crutches to get around. If Jake had been in the Mississippi River, his crutches would have floated to the surface and quickly been discovered. But his crutches, just like Jake, remain unaccounted for 10 years later. Tina believes her son met with foul play, but there's no evidence to fully back up this theory. The Baton Rouge Police Department is at a loss when it comes to the disappearance of Jake. There's little evidence to work with, and no one has come forward with information. On her website, Tina reports in 2020, OSINT team members uncovered intelligence regarding identity theft, forgery, and wire and mail fraud, but it's unclear how this is connected to Jake's case. August 29th of 2024 will mark the 10th anniversary of Jake's disappearance. If still alive today, he would be 31 years old. Jake Allan Latulay is described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, 5'8" to 5'10", and 130 to 150 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Greg Fairbanks of the Baton Rouge Police Department at 225-239-7832, quoting case number 1475861. Number 7. 28-year-old Jessica Nicole Stax was described as a devoted mother and loving person by those who knew her best. Jessica Stax had previously been married to Jacob Stax. The marriage would produce 3 children but eventually broke down. Jessica and her children moved out of the home and began building new lives for themselves in New Albany, Mississippi. In 2020, Jessica met 45-year-old Jerry Wayne Baggett, and their friendship eventually grew into a relationship. The two saw out the new year together before heading to bed to get some rest for the big day ahead of them. On January 1st, 2021, Jessica and Jerry hurried out of their New Albany home and headed to the Tallahatchie River, which lies on the boundaries of Holly Springs National Forest. At 6 a.m., CCTV cameras captured Jessica and Jerry getting gas and essentials at the Pullville Quick Stop convenience store. After that, the two parked their car up near the County Road 46 bridge and headed down to the shores of the river. The pair had borrowed a boat from a friend and wanted to use the boat to hunt from the water. There were just 2 problems for that day. The problem was that the boat they'd borrowed had no oars and no motor. This did little to faze the couple, as they were more than happy to float along the river in whichever direction it took them. This was a good idea in theory, but on January 1st, 2021, the Tallahatchie River was higher than usual thanks to heavy rains in the area. A few hours into their hunting trip, Jessica asked Jerry to use a shovel to pull the boat to the bank, as she wanted to be let out. The events that occurred on January 1st all came from Jerry, the only witness. He claimed that Jessica was concerned with how fast the river was moving, and that the boat was taking on water. Sometime after 10 a.m., Jerry pulled the boat to the side, letting her out on the north side of the river. From here, Jessica planned to make the mile trek back to the car. Jessica Nicole Stax would never be seen or heard from again. It wasn't until 10:15 p.m. on January 1st, 2021, that Jerry called the Union County Sheriff's Office to report her missing. He'd reported that he rode his boat for a few hours before calling a family member to come and get him. Given that over 12 hours had elapsed since Jessica was last seen, the Union County Sheriff's Office immediately dispatched a search team to the Tallahatchie River. A dive team, canine dogs, and drones were deployed in the darkness of January 1st, but nothing immediately stood out to them. As they approached the area where Jessica had apparently left, they found a clue. In the marsh, they found footprints. a single lady-sized 6 or 7 green boot with the top cut off, a coat, and a pair of gloves. Investigators diligently followed the footprints for over 100 yards, which led them towards County Road 46, where their car had been parked. Suddenly, the footprints took a turn northwards towards Highway 30, only stopping when they reached a flooded crop field. With no information or evidence, Jessica's case quickly turned cold. Then, in 2023, the case would take a stunning turn when News Nation Now reached out to Jerry for comment. In his 2023 interview with the news station, Jerry denied ever being on a boat with Jessica on January 1st. He claimed that neither of them could swim, so there was no reason for them to borrow one. He also told News Nation Now that he'd been working on January 1st and hadn't seen Jessica since before the new year. Jessica's phone had apparently been handed over to a friend before getting on the boat, so she and Jerry could call it when they needed to be picked up. Jessica's family doesn't believe she was ever on the boat that day and believes she met with foul play. Until new evidence or witness testimonies come to light, Jessica's case will remain unsolved. Jessica Nicole Stax is described as a white female with blonde hair, green eyes, 5'5" and 110 to 115 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Jimmy Edwards of the Union County Sheriff's Office at 662-534-1943, quoting case number 210003. Number 6. In the face of adversity, 27-year-old Samantha Sayers would always fight back. In her teenage years, Samantha was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, alopecia, which caused all of her hair to fall out. As a result, her confidence took a significant knock, but her fighting spirit quickly took over and she embraced her new look. After graduating from university, Samantha moved out west to Seattle, where her love of the outdoors grew even more. Samantha had carved the perfect life for herself. Washington State provided her with endless trails and hikes, and she met the love of her life, Kevin Dares. The two were a perfect match. Kevin enjoyed hiking and exploring just as much as Samantha did, and he showed her all of the best spots in the state. On August 1st, 2018, Samantha excitedly packed her backpack for another adventure in the wilderness. Unfortunately, Kevin wasn't able to hike with her that day, but that didn't faze Samantha. During her time at the State University of New York, where she studied technical theater design, and technology, she'd completed dozens of solo hikes. Samantha gave Kevin a kiss goodbye, neither of them knowing it would be the last time they would see each other. Sometime before 8 a.m., Samantha, in her blue Ford Fiesta, arrived at the Sunrise Mine Trail car park and began her journey. Vesper Peak is an 8-mile round hike, taking hikers up a 4,000-foot incline. The trail is not advised for novice hikers, as it takes you through some of the toughest terrain in the Cascades National Park. Samantha thought this hike would be a breeze, but somewhere along the way, something went wrong. When 6 p.m. came around and Kevin still hadn't heard from Samantha, he became worried. She told him she would be back by 6 and wasn't contactable by phone. Concerned, Kevin drove to the Sunrise Mine Trail car park, and when he saw her abandoned Ford Fiesta, his heart sank. Samantha was promptly reported missing, and by nightfall, a search and rescue team had assembled to find her. Searchers, who were joined by Kevin, were plagued with bad weather on the steep incline, battling winds and snow. Despite canine dogs and a helicopter being dispatched to the area, no sign of Samantha was found. Days after Samantha disappeared, a witness came forward with what's believed to be the final sighting of her. He claimed that afternoon he saw Samantha eat her lunch before heading down the southwest side of the mountain. Samantha's family does not believe she had an accident while on the trail, and believes she likely met with foul play, although there's no evidence to confirm this. Since 2018, there have been few updates in Samantha's case. Kevin and her family continue to search for her whenever possible. Samantha Claire Sayers is described as a white female with no hair, green eyes, 5'8" and 125 pounds. She has stars on a vine tattooed on her head. Anyone with information is asked to contact Kendra Conley of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office at 425-388-3839, quoting case number 2018-107945. Number 5. 65-year-old William Bill Ott was an avid outdoorsman with plenty of experience under his belt. Growing up near Oregon, Bill had experienced a childhood full of adventure and hiking. His time in the outdoors had taught him many useful survival skills that he had used to get himself out of many sticky situations. In 1981, Bill embarked on an impressive 78-day hike through the north side of the Grand Canyon National Park. In fact, he was the first person to ever complete this route, and that only spurred him on to achieve more. In his daily life, Bill had worked as a river guide, proving his connection and dedication to the outdoors. Even when Bill retired and entered his 60s, he was determined to keep moving and hiking through the Grand Canyon and the vast landscapes that surround it. The Grand Canyon National Park, most famously known for the Grand Canyon, covers an area of 1.2 million acres. Part of the national park is home to the Hualapai Indian Reservation, whose territory covers 108 miles along the Grand Canyon and Colorado River. The reservation is so large that it spans 3 counties. Bill had previously explored some of these areas and was keen to go back. As of 2017, according to KNAU NPR, the Hualapai do not allow hikers on their land, but this didn't deter Bill. On April 5, 2012, Bill left his home in Oregon for what would be a 3-week solo hike through the most remote areas of the Hualapai Indian Reservation. He told his friend Scott that he was in search of, quote, 1,000-year-old rock art panels. That April afternoon, a friend dropped Bill off as close as he could get him to the Hualapai Reservation. For 3 weeks, Bill's friends and family wondered what he was getting up to during his hikes. April 28, 2012 came around quickly, but oddly there was radio silence from Bill. He was uncontactable by phone and appears to have not been seen by anybody in the park. On May 10, 2012, Bill was reported missing to the Coconino County Sheriff's Office, as he was 12 days overdue for his trip. The case was passed over to the Coconino County Search and Rescue Team, who began their investigation. Scott, Bill's friend, also joined in the search and recounted the details to KNAU. Along with people on the ground, the search and rescue team also utilized a helicopter to search over Mohawk Canyon, but there was no sign of him. A team uncovered an area where footprints had been discovered a day earlier, but again their searches proved fruitless. Search and rescue personnel, along with volunteers, covered hundreds of miles in their search for Bill, but not one clue was uncovered. Scott revealed that during a previous hike, Bill had become injured, which caused him to be a week late getting home. After several days of unsuccessful searching, the effort was called off. 10 months later, in February of 2013, a follow-up search was conducted, but again there was simply no sign of Bill. Some believe that, like his previous trip, Bill had become injured and was unable to survive. If still alive today, William Bill Ott would be 77 years old. Bill is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, 5'10" and 180 pounds. He was last seen carrying a gray backpack with a black top and blue trim. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Coconino County Sheriff's Office at 928-774-4523, quoting case number S12-01697. Number 4. 55-year-old Barbara Assunta Bollock and her husband Carl Bollock had shared many happy years together. Carl was an Air Force veteran and had worked for J.P. Morgan Chase in New Jersey, which afforded the pair a comfortable life. By 2001, the pair had retired from their careers and were looking for a change of pace. Barbara was an avid outdoorsman and wanted to be closer to nature. The pair decided to move to Montana, which proved to be the right move for the couple. It took a few weeks for Barbara to adjust to her new environment, but the surrounding nature and trails made Barbara feel at home. After a month of living there, the couple were taking long hikes through Bitterroot Valley and talking about how much they enjoyed their new home. Unfortunately, the bliss of hikes together was cut short when Carl suffered a heart attack. Barbara began taking lone hikes, ensuring to holster her weapon in case of an animal or human attack. On July 17, 2007, Barbara and Carl were visited by Carl's cousin, Donna Biles, and her boyfriend, Jim Ramaker. One evening, over drinks, Donna, Jim, and Barbara planned to hike the Bear Creek Overlook Trail. The next morning, the fog of the drinks from the night before still loomed over Donna's head, and she dropped out. Jim assured Barbara that he was still keen to go, and that morning, around 9 a.m., the pair left to make the 15-minute journey to the trail's entrance. Bear Creek Trail is around 4.5 miles long and covers some rough terrain, although the trail is mainly described as easy. Carl anticipated the pair to be home sometime around noon, but as time ticked away, he became more and more concerned. His fears were compounded when at 2 p.m. the phone rang. It was the Forest Law Service, and they were calling about Barbara. They explained that Jim had reported Barbara missing just minutes earlier. Carl's heart sank instantly into his stomach. Donna and Carl raced to the car and drove to Bear Creek Trail as quickly as possible. In the presence of the officer and Carl, Jim explained the version of events from that day. He claimed that by 11 a.m., they made it to the overlook and decided to stop and get some food that they'd packed earlier. During this time, Jim described talking to two young men in their 20s with a dog about the Bear Creek overlook. By 11:30 a.m., Barbara and Jim began the hike back to the car park, stopping every so often to enjoy the view. At one point during their descent, Jim had gotten ahead of Barbara. When he turned around, she was gone. Jim began searching for Barbara but failed to find her. That's when he made his descent and rushed to the Forest Law Service office to report her missing. Search and rescue teams descended upon the area, but failed to find any sign of Barbara. Carl explained to officers that his wife was extremely scared of heights and would not have gotten near the edge of the overlook or any other trail. Canine dogs were brought in, but failed to pick up her scent anywhere along the trail. After 2 weeks, the search was officially called off. The Ravalli County Sheriff's Office has not named Jim Ramaker as a suspect in Barbara's case, and what happened to her remains a mystery. Barbara Assunta Bollock is described as a white female with red or auburn hair and brown eyes. She's 5 foot and 115 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Dev Potter of the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office at 406-375-4061, quoting case number 080-33129. Number 3. On June 8, 2021, 27-year-old Irish citizen Cian McLaughlin was captured by CCTV cameras entering the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. This would be the last time the 27-year-old was ever seen or heard from. What would follow would be one of the most baffling and bizarre searches in U.S. national park history. In 2021, Cian had moved from Dublin, Ireland to the U.S. to work and also travel. Cian was also an avid outdoorsman and especially enjoyed colder climates. He was an expert snowboarder and hoped his skills would be enough to allow him to work and travel around different U.S. states for the year. By the summer of 2021, Cian had found work in Jackson, Wyoming as a snowboarding instructor. His workplace had provided him with lodgings close to the snow slope, and Cian was able to make a small group of friends with other travelers who were hoping to find money to fund their adventures too. Whenever he was off duty, Cian was out exploring the beautiful wilderness that Wyoming has to offer. He would also take time out to call his friends and family back in Ireland, telling them of his plans. On June 10th, Cian failed to show up for his usual shift at the snow slope. His employers considered this to be out of character for him, who was always punctual and always offered to cover shifts last minute. After searching around his lodgings and speaking to his friends, his employer discovered that Cian had gone on a hike. It wasn't until 2 days later, on June 12, 2021, that Cian was officially reported missing. The Teton Interagency Dispatch Center received the call and immediately began their search. On June 13, 2021, Cian's car was found abandoned at the Lupine Meadows trailhead. News of Cian's disappearance quickly spread around Jackson, and several witnesses came forward, claiming to have seen Cian on the trail system that leads to Garnet Canyon, Surprise Lake, Amphitheater Lake, and Delta Lake. The National Park Service, along with other agencies, were able to trace Cian's phone that had last pinged near Cottonwood Creek at 3:30 p.m. on June 8, 2021, the day he disappeared. Most witness sightings contained the same vague information, but one report really stood out to investigators. 40-year-old Heather Mykoski came forward to the National Park Service, claiming to have seen Cian on June 8th. She told investigators that she saw Cian in the late afternoon hiking on the south side of the Bradley Taggart Moraine. Heather told investigators that the pair had briefly talked, with Cian explaining that he was from Ireland and he was working as a snowboarding instructor in Jackson. According to Heather, Cian closed out the conversation by telling her he was going to hike to Taggart Lake. This was the most information provided out of all the witness statements, and investigators believed they had a credible lead. This was until a year later, when Heather admitted to the media that she'd made up the entire sighting. The National Park Service made a statement about the false report, stating that they had spent over 532 hours searching Taggart Lake and the surrounding areas off the back of Heather's witness sighting. As a result, Heather Mykoski was given a 5-year ban from the Grand Teton National Park and was forced to pay back the $17,600 the National Park Service had spent on that section of the search. Heather Mykoski's report and subsequent admittance had cost the National Park Service not only thousands of dollars, but crucial time. Investigators are now back to square one, and no evidence has been uncovered since. Cian's case remains cold despite the efforts of the National Park Service and his family. Cian McLaughlin is described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, 6 foot and 180 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Tiffany Franks of the Grand Teton National Park Service at 307-739-3301, quoting case number NP210-72630. Number 2. Unfortunately, there's little information available about 30-year-old Damon NES. On October 19th of 2020, Damon drove to Darwin, Northern Territory to Catherine, Northern Territory in his rental car. Originally from Victoria, Damon had traveled to the Northern Territory in search of a new adventure in the harsh and unforgiving Australian outback. The outback, known to locals as the bush, covers an incredible amount of land and is inhospitable. Most of the outback is home to Australia's indigenous groups, and many areas have remained untouched and undiscovered. After arriving in Catherine, Damon rented a hotel room for the night and got a good rest before his adventure. The next morning, Damon left the hotel room and headed to the Nitmaluk National Park. According to records, Damon did not sign in at the national park, and his path remains unknown. He could have headed down any of the trails in the vast 720,000-acre park. Sadly, Damon would never return from his afternoon walk, and he was reported missing the next day when he failed to show up to a canoe tour. His family was informed of his disappearance and flew from Victoria to the Northern Territories. As investigators didn't know where Damon was headed, their investigation efforts had to be split into many teams. The Northern Territories Police, along with the Parks and Wildlife staff, sent officers out on foot as well as in the air to look for Damon. Superintendent Daniel Shawn reported to the NT Independent that over 28 officers trawled the wilderness in 40°C conditions. Unfortunately, due to these conditions, the search was called off on October 26, 2020. Superintendent Shawn also confirmed that Damon left with just his phone and car keys. It's unknown if Damon took any water or food with him, and given the 40-degree weather, he would likely have not lasted long without a source of water. Almost 4 years have passed since Damon mysteriously disappeared, but the Northern Territories Police are still no closer to finding him. Damon NES is described as a white male with brown hair, hazel eyes, 185 to 190 centimeters with a thin build. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Northern Territories Police at 131-444 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Quoting case number 945-8035. Number 1. 23-year-old Jacob Michael Olivier was described as a kind and thoughtful young man. Following graduation from high school, Jacob found himself suffering from mental health issues and was falling into substance abuse. Thankfully, Jacob was able to fight back and underwent rehabilitation and became clean. During this time, Jacob had the full support of his family and friends. By 2011, Jacob was on a better path and slowly carving out a life for himself. But then in August, things took a drastic turn. The timeline of events is unclear in the lead up to Jacob's disappearance. On August 27, 2011, his parents received a call from the Everglades National Park Service in Florida. The park rangers explained how they'd found Jacob's green 1998 Isuzu Hombre truck abandoned in the Pine Glades Lake parking lot. Jacob's parents were immediately alarmed and traveled to the area to convene with officers. His parents explained how they lived in Springs, Texas, and had no idea why Jacob would want to travel to the Everglades National Park. He had no friends or family in the area. Upon discovering this, Jacob was reported missing, and the investigation began. Investigators were unable to uncover a vital clue. On August 24th, 3 days before his car was found abandoned, Jacob was captured on CCTV entering the Everglades National Park. The footage showed Jacob in his 1998 Isuzu Hombre at 1 p.m., entering the park alone. Inside Jacob's car, they discovered a ticket which confirmed this timeline of events. After entering the park, Jacob's out of view of the CCTV cameras as he parks his car and presumably enters the park. As investigators had no idea where he was headed, their search proved extremely difficult. Phone records indicated that the final ping on Jacob's phone was at 4:45 p.m. off an unspecified tower within the park. Investigators were concerned as Jacob's weapon case was found in the car, but his weapon was missing. His family stated that while Jacob had struggled with substance abuse disorder in the past, he was now clean and working as a mechanic in Springs, Texas. As the Everglades National Park encompasses an area of over 1.5 million acres, the Everglades National Park Service employed the assistance of the Civil Air Patrol to aid in their search. Canine units were only able to track Jacob's scent in his truck and in a short perimeter around it. Some have speculated that Jacob may have agreed to meet with someone in the park or left in another vehicle. No solid evidence has ever been uncovered to support any of the current theories in this case. 13 years later, no sign of Jacob Michael Olivier has ever been found. His family are still trying to understand why he traveled over 1,180 miles from Springs, Texas to the Everglades National Park. If still alive today, Jacob would be 36 years old. Jacob is described as a white male with black hair and green eyes, 5'6" and 130 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Robert Gant of the Everglades National Park Service at 305-242-7731, quoting case number 112298. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.